Hi, this is James Rosseau, and I would like to welcome you to another edition of The Courling Solution, where we look to empower you through awareness and actionable insights. On this episode, I am pleased to link up with my special guest, Matt Winter, former president of the Allstate Insurance Company. During our link up, Matt shares incredible nuggets from his journey as he steps through his time in the military, AIG during some of our country's most difficult financial times, and how he led change at the Allstate Insurance Company. You know, in many cases, we often see a person in a certain position, be it an executive role or a position of fame, and we often believe it was a planned path that got them there. However, you will quickly see it was not the case for Matt Winter as he took the Uncharted Course, and he will tell you why. There are lessons here, folks, in terms of career management, principles, adversity, and leadership. So sit back, buckle up, because we're about to link up with Matt Winter. All right, we're here with another edition of the Courling Solution. I am proud to have with me Matt Winter. Matt Winter is the retired president of the Allstate Corporation. As I say that, his smile just got wider.
Yeah, put the accent on retired.
Retired.
Happily retired.
Happily retired. President of the Allstate Insurance Company. Prior to that, Matt did a ton of different jobs. But I'll let Matt tell you about that. So, Matt, why don't you, first of all, thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks. You want me to start in third grade or somewhere sooner than that?
So, start where you think's most relevant for this group.
Well, when you hear this, you'll understand that I don't have a planned out career. My kids like to say I'm like the man with 9 careers, like 9 lives. So I went to school at University of Michigan. My major was wildlife management and forestry. I was in the School of Natural Resources. I had no idea what I was going to do with that, but I just I loved the outdoors. I grew up in New York, and I thought, you know, I'll study ecology and environmental sciences and wildlife management. Some financial difficulties hit. We were running out of money. I was at University of Michigan, and I was an out-of-state student, so there wasn't a lot of financial aid available. And the financial aid office pointed me to the ROTC building on campus. And I said, yeah, but I come from a long line of draft dodgers. I'm not really sure that's a good fit. Right. And I said, we have nothing else for you. So I went, literally I walked in the building. The first office on the left was Air Force ROTC. The guy looked at my glasses, said, go next door. Next door was Navy. I said, nah, I get seasick. I went to the third door. It was Army. The guy said, sit down. I'll let you take a test. I took a couple-hour test, and they offered me a 3-year full-paid scholarship. Came with a catch like everything else does, so I finished with a degree in wildlife management and forestry, but I knew I owed the Army 6 years.
So how'd you get to wildlife management and forestry? What's the story behind that?
You know, I really went to school thinking I was pre-vet. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I worked for an animal hospital in high school. My mom ran the League for Animal Protection in New York. I was always rescuing animals with her. We would go to kill shelters on a Friday afternoon and adopt all the dogs that they were going to put to sleep the next day. And we just either put them in our house, or we'd put them in an animal hospital, or we'd go to a boarding kennel, and we'd rescue the animals. We'd save them from the kill, and then we'd try to get them adopted. So I grew up thinking I want to be a vet, and I figured I could do anything undergrad as long as I took bio and chem and all the hard sciences. So I liked the wildlife, I liked outdoors, and I thought that'd be a good school to go into. So I got the degree in wildlife management, and because I was a scholarship student, instead of getting a reserve commission, I got a regular Army commission, so same as a West Point commission. Went on active duty. This was 1979. I was branch Signal Corps communications specialist. I was with a field artillery unit. Then they needed some guys to start an electronic warfare unit, which was a military intelligence unit, but they wanted people with communications background. So somebody reached out to me and said, "Do you want to be in a combat electronic warfare intelligence unit?" And I laughed. I said, "I don't have any idea what you just said, but yes." Right. I was taught by my dad, raise your hand, you volunteer for stuff. That's how you get stuff. So I volunteered, and I was in the 1st Seaweed Battalion in the Army. And doing that, and then about a year and a half later, my battalion commander, Colonel Stewart, we were out in the field at Yakima Firing Center in Washington. I know I was out there for about 10 or 12 days straight, and I was tired, and I was gross, and I was sweaty. And he comes over, and he finds me, and he said, "You know, there's this program where the Army sends 25 people to law school each year at government expense, and I think you should apply." I said, "Okay, sir." And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "I don't know. I never met a lawyer in my life." I mean, my dad was a car salesman. We grew up very working class. My neighbor was a baker. My other neighbor was a construction worker. Like, I didn't know lawyers, so I didn't know what they did. But the colonel said I should apply for the program. I applied for the program. My wife at the time, my first wife, laughed. She said, "Well, what are you going to do if you get accepted?" I said, "I guess I'm going to go to law school." And she said, "But are you going to like that?" I said, he said it'll be good for me." And so there I was, like, "Send me in, coach." Sure. And I got accepted. So I got accepted to what's called the Funded Legal Education Program. Army sent me to law school. I spent my summers, one at Fort Devens, Mass. with the 10th Special Forces Group, the second summer at Fort Bragg with the 18th Airborne Corps, legal office. When I graduated law school, you go through some military training, and then they send you off, and I got sent to Fort Dix as a prosecutor. So I was a prosecutor there, then became chief of criminal law. And I got picked up to go to the faculty at the Army JAG School in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is on the campus of University of Virginia. Right. So that was during Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield. So this was 81, 82. So I was on the faculty at the JAG School. It was a great life. You know, I was in Charlottesville. While I was there, I got a master's in law degree at University of Virginia because we were afforded faculty privileges. But by then I had started, my second son was born while we were down there, and my parents were getting older. My wife wanted to stop moving, so we decided when that obligation ran out. So by this time, I'd been in the Army 12 years. And she said, like, when this obligation runs out, it's time to go. And I agreed. And
time to get out of the Army.
Time to get out of the Army.
Just too many moves and whatnot.
Yeah, it was too many moves. I had been lucky. I'd been, through a lot of deployable situations, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, the Grenada crisis, the Panama invasion, peace, and I've been lucky. But I wasn't going to be lucky.
Were you enjoying the work itself?
Yeah,
because what I'm hearing is, you got to the Army, Armed Forces, almost by way of somewhat accident.
Oh, absolutely.
And then to the
circuitous route.
Right.
And I got to JAG in a circuitous route.
Exactly.
What I loved about it is I was around mission-driven people.
Okay.
And, we got paid like crap. The living conditions weren't great. But everybody was there for a reason. This was the beginning of the all-volunteer Army. Very beginning. So the draft had ended. It was a group of people. I won't say they were all volunteers because a bunch of them were ordered there by judges who said you either go to jail or join the Army, and they chose the Army. But for the most part, it was a mission-driven group. We were training for what I thought was a real threat, and it felt, even though I grew up in a very liberal, democratic non-militaristic family, there was something about it that felt good, felt right, and so yeah, I enjoyed having a purpose.
That was bigger than the work itself, to a certain degree. Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember. I tell the story a lot. I remember when the Secretary of the Army came to visit Fort Lewis, and I was a second lieutenant. One of my extra duties was to supervise the mess hall. So I was a communications officer, but extra duty was mess hall officer. So I had to give the Secretary of the Army a tour of the mess hall, and Sergeant Johnson was our cook, Staff Sergeant Johnson. He was not the most, he wasn't a particularly military looking. He was a little overweight. He was sloppy. His shirt was never tucked in. And I was like sweating bullets when I had to give the secretary a tour of the mess hall. And we walk in, and he turns to Sergeant Johnson and says, "Sergeant Johnson, what's your job here?" And I was like, "Oh, please don't say I sling crap to the soldiers. Don't." I was dreading what he might say. And he stood up, he said, "Sir, I support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I do it by serving my soldiers food." And it was beautiful. It was like, Secretary beamed. I'm like, my heart's pounding through my chest. I'm like, he got it. Yeah. And it was a beautiful thing. And that's what it was like being around him. And then when I became a JAG officer, a military prosecutor, I found I loved prosecution. I liked the courtroom. I don't know whether I liked it. I have to take that back. I was good at it. I was a good litigator. I knew how to debate. I could see what was happening in the defense. I knew how to structure the prosecution, and I liked the fact that I was telling a story with witnesses. And so I found I was really good at it, which ended up being a lesson numerous years later, figuring out the difference between doing what you're good at and doing what you enjoy. I was raised, if you're good at something, you do it. My dad was a Depression era. Like, if you're good at something and you can make money, that's what you do. Right. And so I never distinguished between what I was good at and what I enjoyed, and maybe what I was good at and enjoyed. But so I did enjoy it. I didn't love the stress of, being in a courtroom and being on trial, and it's an intensely stressful occupation. But when I got out of the military, the natural thing for me to do now was to be a criminal defense attorney. Right. So I went from being a military prosecutor and then a member of the faculty to being a criminal defense attorney. And I did that for a couple of years, and one of my clients just coincidentally ended up being a life insurance company. The chair of the audit committee hired my firm to do an internal investigation of some fraud that had occurred. So we hired PricewaterhouseCoopers to do forensic actuarial work and accounting, and I ran the investigation, and one thing led to another, and I was just about to leave that firm and set up practice with my wife on my own. We had just rented space. This life insurance company heard that I was going out on my own with my wife and said, "No, we'd like you to work for us." And I said, "You could hire me anytime you want, $2.25 an hour." Back then I was very cheap, $2.25 an hour, and yeah, you can hire me. And he said, "No, we mean inside." And so that's what happened. And they made us a ridiculous offer. When I told my wife, I got this offer, she said, "Yeah, but we're going to go into practice." I said, "Yeah, but it's at $135,000 plus bonus." And back then, that was silly money.
Right.
Like I never in my life imagined that I could make that kind of money. And I was making 65 at the other firm, so they literally doubled it.
Yeah, plus bonus. Yeah,
plus bonus, and it was in-house. And I'm thinking, okay. And I thought, for sure, I'll try it. one thing led to another, and after 2 years in-house, I ended up not practicing law anymore. They asked me to take over some businesses, and I ended up running a bunch of businesses and then the career agency system, and that's pretty much how my career started in insurance, and I never looked back. So I have a legal background. I have a master's in law. I practiced for about 6-7 years, and then I moved on, and I still have my bar memberships. I don't know why. I still pay the bar dues for New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut in case I ever want to practice again, but I'd be dangerous in a courtroom now.
It's funny because you look at it and you go, wow, you look at someone's story or journey or credentials and whatnot, you go, how does that happen? But it's a great listen to the story, right? Because it's not planned at all, but you were blessed by those different opportunities, right, that happened along the way. You accepted them, made good out of them, and there's a lot of lessons in that.
Yeah, I had, when I was stationed in Charlottesville at the JAG school, the Judge Advocate General of the Army at the time, it was a Major General, Bill Souter. And I remember being in a meeting with General Souter once, and he met with all of the lieutenants and captains individually to talk to us about our career plans. And I said, General Souter, to help me plan my career. And he said, don't plan your career. Saw the wood in front of you. And I said, what? And he said, saw the wood in front of you. You're given a task, pay attention to that task, and do it flawlessly. He said, and if you're in the right environment with the right people, you'll get noticed and your career will take care of itself. He said, don't look at the wood pile, don't look at the forest, don't look at the amount of work you have to do, don't look at what you want to do 10 years from now. Saw the wood in front of you. And that, for some reason, I was receptive to that, and it emotionally resonated with me to the point that literally became my mantra. I became an opportunist in my career. I never planned anything. Every single opportunity I've had just kind of popped up, and I said, send me in, coach, as long as 3 things were true. As long as I thought I would learn from the new role, as long as I liked and respected the people I would work for and with, and as long as I thought it was something that I could do and make a positive impact. If those 3 questions were answered in the affirmative, then I just took opportunities. Right. And I didn't get too focused on, well, the next thing you should do is this, and you need to build this skill set. I didn't think like that. And I was lucky. I mean, I've been around people I had teams who made me look better than I was. And so people in positions of authority reached out and made other opportunities available. And that's my whole career. My whole career is being asked to do something that I thought I wasn't really ready for. Right. Wasn't sure why they asked me. I mean, I do remember, like, even back at Mass Mutual, right after we merged with Connecticut Mutual, and I got to Mass Mutual, and the chairman called me in and he said, I'd like you to leave the compliance officer job and take over product development. And I remember thinking, Mr. Wheeler, you probably have pulled the wrong resume because I'm not an actuary and I don't know anything about product development. He said, yeah, there's plenty of smart actuaries there. They'll teach you what you need to do, but you're a good leader. You'll do great. And I had that same feeling of, like, are you kidding me? Multiple times in my career when people gave me opportunities to do something that I wouldn't have applied for if they asked me. Like, if they said, hey, this opportunity's there. Like, even the most recent few at Allstate, when I was asked to leave the Allstate Financial, the life company, and take over the P&C business, I I didn't run PNC. I don't know PNC. Right. And this was the largest publicly held PNC company. Like, what are you doing? But they took a chance on me, and I was open to it.
Right. So you think about the people who are probably listening, because I've seen you, the benefit is I've seen you live through that. Just what you just said, saw the wood in front of you. As you're talking about it, I'm thinking about my observations of watching you lead and live through that advice. So you said three things, right? You can learn from the role, like the people around you, you can make an impact. So talk about
like and trust.
Like and trust.
So it's like, respect, and trust, because I've been with people that I liked,
right,
who I neither respected nor fully trusted. I like them as people,
right,
but I need all three components.
Yeah, no, that's good. So what do you do? I'm thinking through, the audience and folks listening, and they go, yeah, those are three strong measurements. If I'm not in a place where those things line up, how should I be thinking about my next steps?
Well, so this is a common question when I tell people that I, much like the Martin Luther King quote that says the arc of the universe bends towards justice. I think good hard work and good leaders are eventually noticed. And if you feel like you're in an environment where that's not going to happen naturally, you should leave the environment, because that means you're not in a meritocracy. And one time in my career, I realized I wasn't in a meritocracy. I wasn't in a place where doing good work, doing the right thing, growing value, taking care of people, building a business, all the things, the core values I believe you have a responsibility to do, stewardship of what you've been entrusted with. And if that's not what gets you selected, then no amount of fantastic sawing the wood in front of you is ever going to make a difference. And so rather than change what you do, change where you are. Like, don't then cave in and say, okay, I guess I have to be political to get ahead, or I have to build a relationship with this person to get ahead, or I guess I have to brand myself differently, or I guess I have to take on higher exposure stuff to get noticed. Like, people come to me all the time and say, so it's not working, what do I do? And I say, leave. Then go to an environment where doing the right thing has its own rewards. Because otherwise you're going to go crazy. You're going to force yourself to engage in behaviors that aren't true to your core value. Right. And you can go through that. People fake it all the time, but that takes its toll. That's when people are miserable where they are, where they're doing things that really are destructive to their core sense of integrity and ethical values. And so I don't think you change yourself in those environments. You change where you are.
Yeah. Now, when I joined, so I had the pleasure of working with Matt roughly 3 years when I was at Allstate. I joined in 14 and left into 16, and didn't work directly for Matt, but had a lot of opportunity to spend time with Matt. Matt gave me a lot of great advice. And one of my observations was I had the chance to see you move from the president of Allstate Financial into running the PNC role and starting to work with the Allstate agents. And if I remember correctly, that was a time where the Allstate agents were, how would I describe them? Let's say there was unrest. They were probably a little shaken, probably not totally sure what was happening in the market, whatever the case may have been. And it felt like your observations and your assessment was you needed to give them a strong sense of confidence around what Allstate was going to do corporately and in the market, et cetera. And I remember you being very much setting the tone, being consistent, letting them know you would be consistent for a while, and starting to really help give them a sense of confidence. Can you talk about, when you think about working with entrepreneurs like agents and such, What are some of your general principles around helping to grow entrepreneurs and trying to help them grow their businesses? Because I've seen you do a couple of different things in that respect.
Well, I think, first of all, you're right. When I took over the distribution role, the agency force had been through some difficult periods of time. And some of the difficulty was uncertainty over the long-term strategy, uncertainty as to the role of the agent in the future, uncertainty over their compensation system and their ability to grow and thrive as business people. But I had this overwhelming belief that the root cause of their unhappiness and their angst and their anxiety, in addition to this lack of confidence that they knew where we were headed, was a belief that the home office and the people in charge did not have the respect for them that they deserved. And I don't think, no matter how clear we were on the strategy or how consistent we were in their pay philosophy or how much money we invested in the infrastructure to support them, unless we started to treat them with the respect that they deserved, I don't think the other work would have been effective. I told you, I grew up in a working class environment. My dad was a car salesman. He worked at an Oldsmobile agency in Brooklyn. And my dad was a proud man, and he's a hard-working guy, and he put 3 kids through college and built a home and built a life for himself. He sold Oldsmobiles when they weren't great. And he sold during difficult times in the economy. The time that I watched him struggle was when he was treated disrespectfully by the new owner of the dealership. And he had worked for an owner of a dealership who respected him and treated him properly. And even though nothing tangible changed for my dad, the way he felt, the way he carried himself, and his unhappiness with treated in a disrespectful manner, I think at the core of what people need, they need to feel like they have purpose. They need to have meaningful work to do, and they need an appropriate amount of respect. And whether you're the maintenance guy there, whether you're mopping the floor after the dealership closes, whether you're the senior salesman, whether you're the head sales, it doesn't matter. You need to treat people with respect. And I think I have a tremendous amount of respect for entrepreneurs. I can't imagine. I'm 61, and I've taken some risks in my career, I think. I've taken some risks in how I've run my life. I've taken risks personally. I've taken risks from a safety standpoint. But to take the risk, the leap of faith that's required to be an entrepreneur, to stake my success solely on myself, to take the financial risk, the reputational risk, the workload risk, to risk my family.
Thanks for the reminders, yes.
I mean, it's shocking.
Right.
And I have a huge amount of respect for people who do that. I have a huge amount of respect for people who bought Allstate agencies. I have a huge amount of respect for people who buy franchises. I have a huge amount of respect for people who start small businesses, who have the guts and the confidence and the risk tolerance to believe in themselves that much. Mm-hmm. And I think that one thing that helped me with the agents is that they sensed that level of respect that I had. And it wasn't phony. It wasn't, oh, I guess I should treat them like I respect them. I literally respected them. I respect them now. I respect entrepreneurs. So I think you're right. Entrepreneurs need consistency because they do business plans that aren't 1-quarter business plans like a corporation or a 1-year business plan. They're investing. Sometimes their payback is 3, 4, depending upon where they are in their life cycle of their business. Sometimes the payback is 5 years. If they can't see 5 years down the road, their natural inclination is to go into harvest mode, not invest money until I have some sense of security about what the future looks like. Because if I'm a smart business person, I invest when I know I'm going to get a return on that investment. So I think what helped during that period was I tried to give them some stability, some sense of where we were headed, some sense that I would be there for a while, some sense about my values, what I believed in, the type of people I would put in key positions, how I made decisions. I tried to be as transparent as possible so they knew, even if they didn't know exactly what decision I was about to make, they would know how I would make the decision.
Yes.
What values I would bring to it, what principle I would bring to that principle-based decision making. So in those cases where they disagreed with the outcome, they got it anyway, they understood, and they could see the bigger purpose. And I think we built a level of mutual respect and trust. And I think that's essential. And I think that we owe, if you're in a home office environment where you're leading entrepreneurs, where you're motivating entrepreneurs, you can't treat them like employees because they're taking risks completely different than employees. The mindset of treating entrepreneurs and independent contractors like employees is, I think, fraught with issues because the pressures on them are much different.
How'd one of the things I recall, I think it was either one day I remember being in Patty Van Lameron's office, or Patty Van Lameren at the time ran, she ran
agency operations.
Agency operations, and Sean, I can't remember Sean's last name.
Broadfield.
Yeah. I remember being in her office, and there was this chart on the board of small, medium, large, mega, right, agencies. And I said, what's that? Because I wasn't spending at that time that much time understanding new agency operations. But Sean then walked me through this process of, said, hey, when a new agency starts, we want to start asking them, what kind of agency do you want? Small, a medium, a large, a mega. He said we were going to be starting this process of testing store prints, but also these spaces where you can have a shared space, so it reduces some of their investment costs, et cetera. And I know a lot has happened under your watch, right? Talk to the extent that you can about that process of trying to help the agents, I guess, identify, where they want to go during the early stages of that process or application process, et cetera.
Well, part of it was countercultural, I will tell you. Part of it was I disagreed philosophically with some work my predecessor had done, who was inclined to try to get a, quote, model agency. And he believed that we could determine the optimal size, structure, and approach of an agency, the cash flows, everything, which to me was much closer to a franchise model.
But your predecessor was a car guy too, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And he was used to an ideal-sized dealership. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it, and I guess this is, kind of some of my core philosophy. I don't like uniformity at all. I like diversity, and I like allowing people to be the best versions of them. So I thought the different sizes, shapes, models, approaches of our agencies was a positive. I thought of it as a strength. The diversification of our distributors was something that added to its beauty, because you can't tell me that an agency on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan should look like an agency in Worland, Wyoming, or that, what works in a rural section of Iowa is what we should be doing in Los Angeles. And so to me, it was an artificial construct to believe that there's a one-size-fits-all answer, that there's this golden model out there that if we could all get to that, if we were a $3.7 million agency with this number of policies and this number of staff, life will be good. Because cash flows are different. Policies cost more in some states. It costs 3 times as much in some states. So I didn't think it was a recognition of the fact that, the strength of this country and our company is that it's wildly different everywhere. And so I think we had to share values. I think we had to share core belief systems about how to treat customers. I think we had to share legal requirements. I think we had to share an approach to serving and an approach to servicing customers. But I don't think we had to fit a cookie cutter. So one of the things I was pushing is to get away from this one ideal model and let them pick. Let them pick. This is a multidisciplinary model. This is what we did actually at one of my prior companies, Mass Mutual. We developed, I can't remember whether it was 4 models or 5 now that I sit here, but one was a solo practitioner model, another was a partnership model, another was a specialized model where you partner with CPAs and estate planning attorneys, and we allowed people to figure out what fit them, their style, their personality, their strengths, and their weaknesses, and brought out the best in them. And so that's what I was trying to do.
And it worked.
Some people still like it. Some people probably still don't like it. I never tried to have unanimous consent or unanimous agreement.
What do you think are some of the common myths about entrepreneurship?
The 2 biggest, I don't know whether it's myths or misperceptions. I guess they're probably the same. One is that all entrepreneurs are motivated solely by money. And I've watched people say, "Oh, but this will be good for them compensation-wise." And I'm like, I think you are confusing the importance of money and the importance of cash flow and the importance of ensuring that people are earning an adequate return. That does not mean that is solely their core motivator. Right. Some are motivated far more by the independence of being an entrepreneur. Some like the risk of being an entrepreneur. Some like having the control of an entrepreneur. Some like the ability to innovate and to create.
Right.
And I think this myth that, you're in an entrepreneurial system, solve the money and the rest will take care of itself, I think that's BS. So I think that's one. I think the other myth about entrepreneurs and not everybody agrees with me because I've recently had this conversation with somebody. I think it is a myth to believe that entrepreneurs don't need a feeling of affiliation and support. That people say, oh, no, they became an entrepreneur because they want to strike out on their own. And, we had a phrase that we coined at one of my prior companies when we were hiring people or contracting, because we didn't hire them, we contracted with them, how to be in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And I think people need to affiliate with others. They need to feel a support network of people like them dealing with the same struggles as them. They don't want to be told what to do by some home office empty suit, but they do want to learn from fellow entrepreneurs who have learned lessons that are hugely valuable, that understand their pressures, that have walked in their shoes. And I think it's a falsehood to believe that they value independence so much that they don't need the support component.
Right. So we've talked about a couple points of the meteoric rise.
It didn't feel meteoric, but...
No? You weren't having enough fun. I mean... Well, I can't talk about fun for lawyers, but insurance is not that much fun. Is it?
Well, so, look, I've had this conversation with my kids. Insurance is fascinating in some ways because you're not selling a tangible product. You're selling a promise. You're selling a contract. That makes it multiple levels more difficult, challenging, sophisticated. It brings nuances to marketing, to production, to product development, to running a distribution force. I think, look, I never grew up as a kid saying, oh, my God, my dream is to be in insurance. Like if you told me that in high school, I would have probably attacked you. But honestly, it's really fascinating because it's an intangible, and selling an intangible is just interesting.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So before the Allstate piece, you were the vice chairman at AIG, during one of the toughest periods in U.S. history. So 2007, 2008, big economic crash. You were at the helm as vice chairman, or with the helm folks, let's call it, the helm team. Talk about some of the biggest lessons learned through that period and how you weathered through that storm, right? Those are periods in time, quite frankly, where some people don't make it through, right? Not everyone makes it through.
Well, let me correct the record. So I wasn't vice chair when the financial crisis started.
Okay.
I was the CEO of American General, which was AIG's North American life operations. It was one of their core operating units. And when the fourth CEO in 9 months came in, and that was Ed Liddy. Ed asked me to move from CEO of American General to be his vice chair. So that was towards the end of the financial crisis.
Got it.
The person who had that job previously only lasted 8 months. He couldn't stand the pressure. It was a huge amount of pressure, and Ed was trying to keep the company together. We had taken our second round of Fed funds and probably second round of TARP funds. The board had changed over. That's when Congress got involved and the hearings had taken place. And so actually it was right after that horrible hearing where Ed was accused of doing stuff he had not done because he had just come in to rescue the company for $1 in compensation. He said, don't pay me, I'll just do what I can. He was a true patriot. He asked me then to go help him, which was one of those cases where, that's truly going out of the frying pan into the fire, because as bad as it was running American General during the financial crisis, going to be vice chair, my job at the time was I ran global operations and systems worldwide. I ran most of the toxic assets, so United Guarantee Corporation, all the the assets that couldn't be sold off, that were troubled assets. I became chairman of the combined Sun America and American General, the life and retirement operations. I ran India's operation, so the country manager for India reported to me, and I was the chief administrative officer. So it was a thankless job, to say the least, but it was a fascinating job, and I didn't feel ready for it. I'd never run an international operation before, and all of a sudden I had, literally from the day I accepted that job, I had operations in 162 countries. I learned truly what it means to let go and stop trying to believe you can control everything. Because when I took over, right when I took over, I had 26 direct reports. They just assigned people to me. I think I had 60-something thousand people in my area, and I was trying to deal with the Fed and the Treasury and the White House and the compensation czar. We were trying to deal with all that and try to run everything. And what you realize is you grew up thinking, okay, as a CEO or as a supervisor, my job is to be able to dive deep and do this. And I remember a guy who ran India, so he had 12 AIG companies in India, I think 12, of all types, a life company, a real estate company, investment company, P&C companies, infrastructure, all different stuff. And I told, his name was Sunil Mehta, and I went over to India, met with him, met with all the regulatory bodies, and I said, Sunil, here's the deal. I know you're responsible for a lot, and this is big. You got 12 companies. I have about half an hour a week that I can devote to India. So I'm going to call you at 6:30 my time in New York every week, and we have half an hour. We have to do everything. You have to get decisions done. You have to give me a briefing. You have to tell me what's happening. You have to tell me where you need help. And we have a half an hour, maybe if I push it, 45 minutes. And somehow I'm going to trust you, you're going to trust me, and we're going to make decisions like crazy, and we're going to move on, and we're going to save this. And you don't do that because you want to. You do that because you have to. But once you do it and you realize the wheels don't come off, and he takes on the additional responsibility necessary, and everybody rises to the occasion, and he learns how to be precise and prioritize and tell you what's really important, where he really needs you, and you learn what I call military-style decision-making, which is rule out the really stupid decisions, rule out the illegal decisions, try to get in the zone of reasonableness, and give it your best shot. And we would just move, and you realize that you can survive that way. And so that taught me to let go. It taught me a different style of leadership. It taught me to get great people in place, give them guidance, give them tools, give them resources, and let them go, because I learned that you can do that. I had one other experience when I did that, when the board at Mass Mutual, I think to teach me a lesson, signed me up for the Harvard's Advanced Management Program. It's at the time, I think it was 9 weeks straight, 9 weeks, 6 days a week at Harvard Business School. And I was running the domestic insurance business. And they said, yeah, you're only allowed an hour a day to check in. Everything else you got to let your team run. We want you to go through this program at Harvard. And I was like, no, it'll be the end of the world as we know it. And you realize after you do it, you're not indispensable. And if you give good guidance to good people and you help them make mid-course corrections, and you don't beat people up, and you treat them as, there's a quote I like, a Goethe quote, treat people as if they were what they ought to be, and you will help them become what they are capable of becoming. Which is treat them as if they're the brilliant executives and great people that they have the potential to be, and most of them rise to the occasion.
You've laid out a lot of things here. The one question I would ask, following up on the AIG piece, is back to your pieces around saw the wood in front of you, right? And the part around trusting and liking the people, right? And the whole piece around the environment. Surely with the 60,000 people you're responsible for at the time and the rest of the folks inside of AIG, it's probably not feeling like the place to be. What'd you do to help people feel like the place to be? I'm sure you probably wanted to, you can't just barricade the doors and tell everyone to stay, but how do you help people?
It was a terribly difficult place. It was a difficult place because we were the most hated company in the world. We literally were getting spit at as you walk in the building. People were picketing and protesting outside AIG headquarters on Pine Street. My dad, who was still alive at the time, said that he didn't tell people that's who I worked for anymore. He just said that I was unemployed or something, because it just killed him to tell people that I was at AIG. And a lot of people who were instantly marketable just ran for the hills and went to other companies. But I had made a commitment to Ed. I made a commitment to him. I said, I will stay as long as he stays. And so my job was to help him be successful and to help him retain as many people as possible. And despite terrible working conditions, all of our pay was cut by the compensation czar, Ken Feinberg, and Rahm Emanuel and the team. And then that was pretty brutal. Because you're working 15, 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and making about a third of what you were, and you're hated. And so that's not a great value proposition. But I think one of the things Ed brought to the table was this belief that we were trying to save the financial system, not only of the country, but of the world, and that AIG, it was bad enough that Lehman Brothers had gone under. If AIG went under, it could have dramatic impact on the financial system in a really deep systemic way. And so I went back to what I learned in the military when, how do you get people who are getting paid like crap in horrible, eating garbage food, sleeping on the ground in pup tents, how do you get them to run towards somebody who's shooting at them? That's not a natural thing. You run away from somebody who's shooting at you. How do you get people to go through hell? They got to believe in a bigger purpose. And so we talked about the work we were doing as a noble purpose that not everybody got, not everybody understood, not everybody agreed in. And a lot of people second-guessed us, and a lot of people criticized us. But I believed, number one, I made a commitment to Ed, and that's kind of how I was raised. You make a commitment to somebody, you meet that commitment unless you're physically incapable of. So I stayed with Ed until he announced he was leaving. When he announced he was leaving, 3 days later, I told his replacement that I was going to leave AIG because my commitment was to Ed to help him during that interim period. But I tried to treat people with respect, to make them know that they were appreciated, to believe that there was a way out, that we were going to solve this, to give them a voice in it. You become part psychiatrist, part football coach, part marriage therapist, part patriot, recruiter, a little bit of everything. It takes a lot of work to try to keep people engaged in what is a horrific day-to-day existence.
So now you're retired and, again, busier probably than you were when you were working. So, a lot of times they say when people retire, one of the best things I've heard someone say is you don't just retire, you retire to something. What have you retired to?
Well, I retired to the two pieces of my life that I thought had not received as much focus, time, and attention as they deserved. I tried to be very conscious during my life to try to give equal time to work commitments, emotional commitments, mental, spiritual, family, community. But the reality is that balance got out of whack. And I retired to the two pieces that I felt a real gnawing need to devote more time to. And that was community and nonprofit work and family. And my wife and my kids made a huge number of sacrifices during my work career. They were very supportive about it, but that doesn't mean that they didn't make sacrifices. And I did not give them the attention. For 8 years, I commuted between Hartford and Chicago. My wife was alone Sunday night through Thursday night every week while I was in Chicago. And then we reconnected Thursday night, spent the weekend together, and yes, I was supportive, and I tried to be on the phone, but she was alone. And I wanted to reconnect and deepen that relationship because I felt like I had not done that sufficiently. And although Allstate and Tom were hugely supportive of the work I was doing with nonprofits, specifically some work I was doing with some nonviolence work and with Feeding America, some hunger relief work. I felt like I was fitting it in instead of making it a core part. And so now my life is in balance. So now I am devoting, it feels like about a quarter of my time to philanthropy and nonprofit work. My family started a family foundation. We funded it. The board of directors are my wife and I and my 4 kids. We have a board meeting every month. We review potential funding opportunities. We direct philanthropic funds to what we believe are things within our focal areas that's important. So my kids learn philanthropy and giving back, and they learn how to really participate. I'm very active in Feeding America. My wife and I have been doing additional training and work in a nonviolence curriculum that follows the principles of Martin Luther King with a great civil rights pioneer, Dr. Bernard Lafayette, who we have been fortunate enough to study with. And so we're now we're diving in and giving that the attention it deserves. And my wife and I are doing travel together, not hosting 1,000 agents and not hosting a dinner, but it was really funny. We just came back from a trip to Israel, and like the second or third night, she said, "This is so wonderful. We're going to dinner and we're just talking to each other instead of having to host a bunch of people, and we're picking the restaurants, and it's, we've been doing it for a long time." She was an executive spouse for many years, and she gave up her career as an attorney to support me. And so now that's become a big component of it, and spending more time on the spiritual stuff. The first thing I did, the first thing I did was go to a board meeting for a public company afterwards. But then 2 weeks after that, I did a 7-day silent meditation retreat out in California.
Oh, wow.
I've been a meditator for years, but I haven't had the ability to disappear for 7 days.
7 days silent.
7 days silent at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Whitaker, California. And that was just such a treat to be able to devote that time to kind of reset myself and to focus inward and to get in the right state. So all those pieces that kind of got pushed off to the side, we'll do the, I was meditating for 15 minutes a morning, and I like meditating for like 3 and 5 day retreats. And 15 minutes a morning is good, but it's nowhere close to where you get to when you're in an intense meditation retreat. So, I love retirement. It's like all the things, like guitar. I was just telling you, I played guitar when I was 11 through 16, and then I stopped. I don't know. I can't even remember why. Oh, I think I do. I started doing martial arts, and I broke my fingers a bunch of times in Taekwondo, and I couldn't play guitar anymore, and I decided I loved martial arts more than I loved guitar, and I went through that phase. And so then I never went back. Now I'm back to struggling to get my fingers to move, 61-year-old fingers that got broken a bunch of times trying to get them to move. But retirement, I retired to the pieces of my life that had not received enough attention.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've laid out a lot of things. I'm going to recap and for folks. And as I do, let me know if there's any other skills or points of motivation you would add. So one, you talked about mission-driven people is really what sustains you during your Army time, which I think is really important for people to take away, when you're in different environments. Two, planning careers, we talk about this a lot, that first of all, man plans and God laughs anyway, but your boss's advice at that time.
There's a boxing analogy there. Everybody has a plan in the ring until they get punched in the face the first time.
Yeah, exactly. But your boss's advice at that time is saw the wood in front of you, which you then also added, if you can learn from the role, point one, trust and like the people, and then thirdly, can make an impact, it's probably a good deal. The third point you talked about was, rather than change what you do, change where you are, if you think you're doing the right thing, which I think is excellent. Fourth, when we were talking about the Allstate agents, was your singular point around really respect for the distribution system, which you really circled around your dad's example and what some of the work he did as a salesperson back in the day. Showing people who you are so they understand the decisions you make. And I think as leaders, for the audience, that is so critical. Because one of the things, and I saw Matt do that over and over again, and some of the leaders I admire do that. They don't just unveil the decision. They show people their thought process, their principles, their values. If you're looking for a good book, by the way, and I just started it, so I can't say endorse the whole thing yet, but I've started and so far I like it. Ray, I'm going to mess his name up, but his book on principles, The Investor, Ray Dalio's book on principles is a good book to pick up, right? Because it's the same thought process of if you show people who you are, what your core is about, then everything that comes out from you, they'll understand, right? But more importantly, they understand where it's coming from. Sixth, allow people to be the best version of themselves. And that was, again, when we were talking about the Allstate models and the varying degrees of what agents could do. And lastly, when we were talking about AIG, Matt's point around learning to let go and really giving people the tools and things they need to be successful, learning to let go. So, Matt, anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I guess the one other thing I would say, I try to tell everybody who I try to mentor or coach, is self-care and stress management is just so important. And everybody thinks that they can just deal with stress and just ignore it. Nobody ignores stress. Stress takes its toll on you, or more likely it takes its toll on your spouse or your loved ones or your kids or your dog or your friends, because stress doesn't just stay out there. Right. And you cannot be in a stressful role or a stressful job or a stressful environment and not get impacted by it. And so instead of being tough and instead of saying, I'm okay, I'm dealing with it, you have to make active stress management part of what you do. And for different people, that's different things. For some, it's physical activity. It's a workout routine. For some, it's yoga. For some, it's meditation. For some, it's boxing. For some, it's getting a massage every week. For me, when I was at my worst at AIG, it was all those things. I got a massage, I meditated, I boxed, I name it. I tried everything I could to engage in self-care and reduce the likelihood that stress was either going to be corrosive to me or to my relationships or to people I love.
Right. That's great. Great advice. Well, last question for you. I love to end with this question. Again, this show is about, overall, what we're at Courling Solutions about is helping people reach their potential. And on this program, I love to think about it from a people and leadership development perspective, and people like yourself who've had wonderful experiences. Who else do you know that you think we should know? Who else should we have in that chair?
There are so many,
Just one person you might introduce us to that we can welcome to the program.
Well, let me give you a couple of options, and it depends on what you're looking for. At times I felt like I had a personal board of directors. I'd meet people who I thought influenced me in different ways, and there was no commonality among them. I liked the fact that everybody was different. So I've met people in the nonprofit world who just are so impressive. Bob Sanborn is a name that comes to mind. Bob is just a fascinating man who runs an organization called Children at Risk in Houston, and primarily dealing with combating human trafficking in Texas. And his story is just, it's inspirational, and it's purpose-driven and motivational and inspirational. And there's a man I've just recently met, Rosseau Bernard, who runs an organization called the ARC, or Bridges Over the River, in Washington, D.C. And Rosseau, talking to him, he just joined our board at Feeding America, and I've just, I just found him fascinating. And the third person also who I interviewed and just joined the board of Feeding America, who is just an interesting human being, is Dr. Vivek Murthy, who's the former Surgeon General for the United States. I'm on the chair of the governance committee on Feeding America, so it was my job to do a screening interview for him, which was supposed to be a half an hour. And I must have talked to him for an hour and a half, because I couldn't stop talking to him, just because I thought, this man has so much to say and so many interesting insights about the health of society and mental health perspectives and the impact of mental and emotional health on our physical well-being. And so those are three names that, they all are people who, certainly I could give you 20 other people who I think are fascinating and impressive, and who I think your listeners would probably love to hear from, but those are three that just popped into my head when you asked that.
Matt, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your mentorship and friendship. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you for linking up with me for another episode of The Courling Solution. 3 important notes before you leave. Number 1, please subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or whatever your service of choice, you will see a subscribe button. Please use it. You will then be notified each time a new episode is available. Number 2, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes, or again, whatever your service of choice. As a new podcast, this is very important for us. It is truly one of the biggest ways you can support us. Number 3, this program is about empowering you through awareness and actionable insights in the areas of personal and leadership development, entrepreneurship, and social justice, with a focus on education in particular. As you listen to the show, you will have questions. You will hear some things that are new to you and maybe terminology you've heard for the first time. All of those things are good, and I am here to serve you. Go to our website, thecorelingsolution.com, and right below the show notes for that podcast episode, you can ask your questions right there. You can mention the challenges you face in the areas I mentioned, and you can even tell me about other guests you'd like to hear from. Thank you so much for linking up, and I'll see you next episode.